So first question here tonight, just for a bit of fun. Would you, because we're talking about money, would you eat 100 hamburgers right here, right now for $1 million? Yes or no?
100%.
Benny?
Is there risk of death?
100%.
Yes. Yes, there is.
I'm not so... No, I'd say no.
Yeah? Okay. Fair enough.
I reckon it's worth to have a go. Like, have a go. You probably get nowhere near it, but you'd hate it just to get to 75, and then just be. I think that's even possible, is it? 75 hamburgers. Junior burgers, Big Macs. Can you qualify it?
I reckon Big Macs.
Oh, get out of it.
Big Macs. Yeah. Come on. Nothing's impossible, right? Like, come on. We've got to have faith.
What about sliders? Can we go down there?
Let's go sliders. Would you do it for 100 sliders?
Maybe.
Yeah, I'd have a crack because I'm actually worth more to my wife dead than I am alive because of my life insurance policy. So even if I do die, just kidding.
So there's pros and cons.
Once a financial advisor, always a financial advisor, Chris. Hey, that's excellent.
All right, very cool. So tonight, obviously, we're talking about finances, and I think first of all, to get into the questions, in church we talk about money, which is amazing, and I love that we're a part of a church that talks about money because it's so important to the heart of God. And I think this can be an area sometimes, though, which can carry a bit of confusion around it as well. Often there's mindsets around money, which is, we need to be not greedy and not, we obviously need to be wise around our finances and things like that. So I thought it'd be really helpful just for the first question, just to get like a good theological base, I suppose, for finance and wealth building and money and what that actually looks like. And so what does God say about money would be my question to you guys here tonight. Let's start with Chapo.
I was hoping the pastor would take it. No. I mean, I always default to the Sermon on the Mount a lot of the time. So for those who might not be familiar with it, in Matthew 5, 6 and 7, Jesus does his infamous Sermon on the Mount where he does a lot of teaching around lots of different areas, but he actually spends a lot of time talking about money. And for me, that's where I find is a great reference point because he really goes to the heart of the matter with money and finance in that. So often we can place our trust in finance, in money, rather than on God. So often we can allow riches and the things of this world to take control of our hearts and substitute that in for a meaningful relationship with Jesus. And really, when you look at a lot of themes throughout the Bible, and a lot of the times God has to call people to account for not using their money or their finance correctly, it's because of their heart posture. It flows out of that place. And I think when you sort of talk about a scriptural basis and an understanding of money, of what to do with it, how to do with it, and how to use it as a tool to benefit others rather than to enrich yourself or even worship it in some ways, I think that's always a good place to start. Every time I come back to it, I think, I love Andy Goula. He talks about spiritual wedgies, and I always feel like when I go through and I read that part of scripture, it's like a spiritual wedgie over and over again, reminding me that I've really got to keep my heart in check and not put my eyes on other things like that.
That's brilliant. So it's like a heart posture. Yeah, that's brilliant. What would you say to that, Ben?
I'd totally agree with Chris. I think for me, it's the question of can you serve both God and money? You cannot. That's what the word says. Yeah. So you make a choice. So who or what am I going to serve? Am I going to serve money or mammon or the Lord? Yeah. And like Chris put his brilliant point, it's not just I would say it is a one-time sort of decision, but then it's a lifestyle. Exactly. It's a choice. Exactly. And we can probably talk a lot more about this tonight, but I think that would be one of my sort of key tenets around say wisdom from a biblical perspective around finances. Am I serving the Lord or am I serving money? And then probably just an add-on to that is something that Mel and I talk about regularly is we do not get emotional about finance. Good. It is a tool. Yep. Wow. It is a tool. It is nothing more than that. Yep. The moment that you start to get emotional about money, the Bible talks about it. The root of many evils is the love of money. So you cannot be emotional about a tool. And it's a wonderful tool. It's an amazing tool. It will do what you want it to do. It'll go where you want it to go. Incredibly powerful. But it is a horrible master. If money has mastery over you, you're in a really bad place. So I really believe the word talks about it the other way around. We are meant to be masters of it. And it should be a tool that's at the disposal of the Christian. That's my thought.
So good.
And just to pick up on that, I love that thought, Ben and Chris. You know, you said that idea, like that's Jesus talking. Like you cannot serve both God and money, but you can serve God with your money. Yes. There's a distinct difference. So I think it's a question of lordship first of all. What am I serving and who am I serving? Is my whole life under the lordship of Jesus? And then when it is, then it understands, well, if I'm living my life under his lordship, then everything I have is a way in which I can serve him. I serve God with everything I have. And I think, there's so much. What does God say about money? It's like there's about 3,000 scriptures. But if I could just, like everyone's talking about one frame of reference, the beginning thought for me is stewardship. Awesome. When I think about money, I think about stewardship. Learning, and if you're young, learning to govern what God has given you, and he'll entrust you with more. And I think it says in the Old Testament, it says that when they were progressing into the promised land, it said God gave them the promised land little by little. It actually took a generation for them to come in. Why? Because they were learning how to govern what God had given them. And as they were able to effectively steward it well, then God said, you can have more. And I think that's been the journey, and I think we'd probably all share stories similar around that. It's just finding that we start in a certain place, and it's not some incredibly flourishing, financial place necessarily. We're all starting as, students. We're starting with just a little, but just learning what I just call the principles of God in our life and applying them in your world. And I think as you begin to apply that, you just see that principle outworked,
That's excellent. So it's about being like faithful stewards with our finances in that season. But you touched on, serving God and money. And just off the back of that, does that mean if we're serving God, does that mean we're going to have no money or we're going to be poor? Like, what does that look like?
I think that's a lie from the pit of hell.
Totally.
I really do. That's okay, Pastor, I'll go there.
You said it now.
It is.
No, it's good.
Sorry. It's totally incorrect. Yeah. It is totally incorrect. Christians should be influential, should be powerful, and should be equipped to do what it is that God's calling them to do. And it's totally a spiritual thing, but it's also a practical thing as well. You can be totally ineffective if you don't have your financial world under control. And I actually think regularly it's a strategy from the enemy to knock people out, is to mess up with that area. You might have other areas under control, but we are in the world, not of the world. We need to engage in commerce with the world. It's how money is quite important, whether you're feeding your children or providing for your family or giving to the house. We've got to get a grip on it as Christians. We really do. It's so important. And Jesus talked about it all the time. And so I don't think we should be afraid of it. There's nothing to be afraid of, if we can understand it and what its purpose is in our lives and have mastery over it. That would be my take on it.
So saying it's not a bad thing to be wealthy. It's a really, really good thing. It's about how
Absolutely.
We use it. It's about serving God in that process.
If it is on purpose, for a purpose, and you are using that wealth to advance the kingdom of God, the kingdom of God is forcefully advancing, and forceful men and women lay hold of it. Means there is a battle, particularly in the world of finance, and it's high time that the church takes it.
Come on.
Jesus says, silver is mine and the gold is mine.
Right. Yep.
We should have the same posture.
Yeah.
Come on. Says a round of applause. So good.
Yeah, I'm passionate about it. I really am.
Love that.
Yeah.
So if wealth is a really good thing and God has called us to build it and be good stewards in this area, what are some ways that we can do that? Like if you were to go back to maybe you're 20, 21, 22 years old, what would you say to your younger self to put yourself in a place that you can build wealth in a way that's healthy, that's God-honoring, and that serves other people. Maybe, Chris, if you could speak into that a little bit.
Yeah, me. So first of all, I just got to say this. It's boring, I know. I'm a financial advisor. This is general advice, blah, blah, blah. You all know that. I'm not telling you to 100% do this. Now, the compliance people can get off my back, so that's cool. On that note, that being said, when I was young, I think, and this is the real benefit about being in this church and in this house, is that we have so many great people who are that next step ahead of where you might be now. Whether you're young or old, there are men and women who have already walked the journey that you have walked. And you can access the wisdom that they have inside their hearts to be able to input and to receive into your world. And one of the best things I ever did was just to give you a bit of my backstory, I moved out of home at 17. It wasn't a lot of people say that that's a sad story or bad. I actually made the choice because of just my mum was moving somewhere else and I wanted to stay where I was. And essentially, I mean, that's pretty confronting, having to, feed yourself. That was a big deal at 17. Look after yourself, pay bills, all those sorts of things. But really, I didn't know anything about money, but I had one thing that I knew that I could do, is that there were men in the church that I could go talk to. And so I approached a particular person. It was actually Tim Holst, who sits on our board. And I remember just sitting down and just picking his brains, just asking him question after question after question, what I do. And more often than not, he'd tell me to go read a book. He wouldn't give me the answer. But, and so, one of the first books I read was Richest Man in Babylon and other things like that. But I think that for me, that would be the first thing that I would recommend to any person in this room, no matter what age or stage of life they're in, is approach someone in the church who is on that next step along for you, even if they're a few steps along, and ask them for wisdom for the season of life you're in. And to be honest with you, I don't like to brag, but I guess from that, I learnt and started putting into place simple little steps like Pastor Andrew talked about that have held me in good stead for the rest of my life. Now, does that mean I've arrived? By no means. I'm trying to access other people's wisdom now for the next levels that I need to go to. But doing it at that season of my life, I think has just made a huge difference. And I'm sure that probably some of these other guys will say something similar. So,
brilliant. So good. Thank you. That was brilliant. Yeah, and I think it's so important, to just ask questions, to be humble enough to know that we don't know it all. To be able to ask questions is so powerful, isn't it? Of people that have done that journey before us. It's awesome. What would you say to that, Ben?
Yeah, completely agree with Chris. I think you should always try and stand on the shoulders of giants. In other words, lean on the wisdom and the knowledge of those that have been before you, and don't try and figure it all out yourself. That's dangerous. Seek good counsel, wisdom, and I think that the other thing too is, if we sort of reflect on what would you say to your younger self, and encouraging your younger self, is to be bold.
Yeah, come on.
To dream dreams. And to realise that, whatever your dreams might be, they're not trivial, they're important to God. And God puts dreams in our hearts for a reason. And I think the key thing that maybe I have personally learnt about that over my journey is that sometimes those dreams can take time to be realised. And that's okay. That's okay. There's a seasonality to things. And you have to understand that. Like, for example, for the longest time, had the dream of owning our own business and doing things in the marketplace and in business. But there was literal years where God's like, yep, that's the dream, but wait. Wait? Oh, really, Lord? No, you're going to wait. You're going to go and, first of all, you're going to go and serve another man's vision. You're going to go and get training in the marketplace. You're going to go and learn, and you're going to have the opportunity to work at some of the greatest consulting firms in the world, and get sharpened and refined. And then probably after, 8 years or something, all right, now you're ready. Great, thank you, Jesus. And you're really ready to go.
Yeah, especially after 8 years. That's
Oh, yeah, totally. But then, then there'll be the next chapter. So I would probably point to that. Other quick thing I'd point out is the wonderful benefit of going out and buying your first home. That is probably one of the principal things that we could look to doing, and I'm sure Chris and Pastor Andrew could talk about this, but certainly from our experience, it's one of the principal things we could do to build wealth and create a base to springboard off into your financial future. And I don't know if there's questions on that later, but
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just add something? It's never too early to start saving for a house.
100%.
It is never too early to start saving for a house. Even if you're young, even if it's $2 a week into a high interest savings
100%.
account, it is never too early. And the best thing about your generation is you actually will get interest paid on your savings at the moment, which is, we've gone through 10, 15 years of sub 1% interest rates. At least you'll see the benefit every month of a meaningful amount compounding on that. And as you earn more, you can direct more to it. But I would just say you are never too young to save for a house. And you might be intimidated seeing property prices the way they are. Bit of context, when I started doing, like, setting my heart to buy a house, it was around about the sort of early 2000s, and I'm not even kidding, property prices doubled in the space of about 2 years. And the houses that I thought I was going to be able to buy in 3 years' time now weren't available to me. And it actually probably took me about another 6, 7 years before I actually did it. But all I would say is that it's a very big media narrative, and it's a common thing to talk about home ownership being out of reach of young people and things like that.
It's a lie.
And I would say, yeah, I agree, it is a lie. I would say that, again, access the wisdom of the people in this church, talk to people, understand the journey and the process that you have to go through. It's not easy. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but it is a journey, and you can do it if you're willing to add faith and trust God, because God wants you to own a house. He wants you to be, to be set up, but there's also got to be wisdom involved in it as well. But yeah, all I would say is just start saving early for that. Keep praying and believing God. Keep an atmosphere of faith, and, don't buy into the media narrative about that, it's going to be impossible for young people, or even single people or things like that who might be a bit older and might not earn enough. Again, you can always own a property, and that's one of the big beliefs from me. And again, it's just a journey. It's difficult. It's not easy, but you can do it.
So good.
Just on that, I love what you both have shared. Talking about this thing of like accessing wisdom, and also just buying a house. When you guys were talking, I remember that, back in my mid-20s, there was a guy in our church who helped me so much in this area. And guy, again, a couple of stages ahead, his name was John Meek. And I would spend time with him, and he loved the house of God, successful in his business, great family, godly man. And I just knew there was something on his life. One of the things, when I started talking to him about just the future and talking about it, one of the things he said, he goes, I want you to start writing down your vision. Awesome. And it was scary, because I was in my mid-20s, and he said, I want you to write, and he helped me do it. What does my life look like 10 years from now? And began to write out. He says, I want you to pray about it, think about it, write about it. Again, writing about things like, in 10 years' time from now, I'm gonna own a home. And I wrote out this list of things about it encompassed ministry, it encompassed things like being married, it encompassed there was not just getting things, there was giving things on there. The power of doing that, I think the power of having a vision, a godly vision for your future, and begin to live your life in that direction. As you said before, it's like there's narratives around about, you can't do this, and you'll never get this, and you couldn't buy a house, and all those sort of things. If you listen to all those things, you'll never do anything. But if you set your heart with God on a godly vision, and I think that godly vision is that God actually wants to bless us to be a blessing. Awesome. And he wants us to step into a home. And I'll just say that to you, Ben, and Chris, I know is the same thing. It's like that step is a significant step, financially, spiritually, in so many ways. It happens in churches when the churches buy their land. It's a massive step. It comes with spiritual battles. It comes with fights. It comes with it comes with all kinds of opposition. But when a church can buy land and plant themselves, it's something. But the same in families too. When you step across that line, or single people or individuals, and begin to actually then step out and say, God, I believe that, God, you want to bless me. I believe, God, that you can move in this, and that we could buy a house, or we could buy a unit, we could own our own land. And then you begin to move in that direction and have a persistent faith. It's amazing what God will do.
So good. That's brilliant. Off the back of that, when would you say is the right time to buy a house? Like what stage financially, spiritually? emotionally do you need to be at to be able to buy a house?
I think it comes back to, I think at the end of the day, it's a faith step no matter what, buying a house, because it's intimidating. Like, I think, I'll never forget the first time I did it. We bought the house, we were building, so we built the house, and we're not even living in it, and you're seeing like the interest payments go and like money come out of your account. You're like, oh dear God, like this is a bit different. Yeah. And if I don't pay that money, the bank takes control of my money, of my house, and I lose it. And there is a bit of a oh damn moment that comes along the pipe when that happens. But I think that in terms of when you're ready, I think that, well, one, you've got to save a deposit. Whether, practically speaking, what that looks like, again, it's probably best to seek some wisdom for that stage of life. I generally encourage at least 10% of whatever you're trying to purchase. Ideally, you do 20% so you don't have to pay LMI. I do know people who have done it with less. I've known people that have done it with 5% and other things like that as well. So just because that's what I sort of recommend doesn't necessarily mean that's the only way to do it. And I mean, there's lots of different schemes that are available and things that have made ownership a lot more, I guess, open to so many different people, particularly first homeowners. But all I would say is that I think it's an important thing to lean on the wisdom of the people in your world to understand when you're ready, and to have people praying with you, because you'll find it is a journey. There's nothing harder than when you're trying to buy a house and you turn up to an open house and there's 20 other couples there and you're like, oh man, like, am I ever going to get a house? Like, everyone's trying to get this house, and that's it. You need people in your corner to counsel you, to encourage you, to give you wisdom, and to pray with you, so that when you know that it's time to go, you know it's time to go. And I mean, the other stuff, as far as financing and things like that, you just talk to the right brokers and other things like that at that time. But I would honestly start with just making sure you got the right people in your world, people who've been through the journey and can speak faith into your world and encourage you and take you through that on that journey.
That's brilliant. Thank you. That's brilliant. Just another question practically around finances, especially like young adult years. What are some other couple of things that you would recommend in terms of do's and don'ts for your finances? Like, do we buy a car and get a loan on a car? Do we have to have a budget, or can we just wing it? What are some do's and don'ts of finances that we really need to get right in that early stage of
I think Pastor Andrew should share here, because he has some pretty great stories about when he first became a teacher. And I remember jumping into the Corolla that he bought with that is it personal loan or something like that?
Love to hear about that, Pastor Andrew, if you're willing.
He did all the wrong things.
Yes.
All the wrong.
Yes. Why don't you tell people about your wrong mistakes, Chabo? Thanks for telling them about my mistakes, but it's a good segue. Yeah, so that's a don't. So, being the 5-year uni student, and then finally getting the teaching gig, and then like a salary like I'd never seen before. And then I was like, I've always had my eye on this Mitsubishi Lancer with the sports kit on the side. I should go and get a loan and buy this, which I did. It was a great car, by the way. But it was a terrible loan that I was paying back. But thankfully, about a year after I got the car, I got married to my wife, Wendy, who was far better in the savings department. So she paid out the loan. So it all worked out well. It was great. But don't do that.
Should we do that or not?
Yeah, it's a poor strategy. Not repeatable.
So how do we do a good budget? How do you actually work that out? If you've never done one before, you've got heaps of different bills and things to pay. What would you?
Real simple. Doesn't need to be complicated. We would run ours on a monthly basis when we were PAYG, and now we just sort of similar, a little different to now that we're running our own business self-employed. But basically, what's coming in, what's going out, that's about it. So you need to understand, obviously, your income and your expenses, and make sure that you allow, and maybe Chris wants to elaborate on it, but allow for a contingency or a buffer or something like that. Obviously, it goes without question, you want to account for your tithes and offerings. That is fundamental. It should be line item number 1 in your expenses. So income, expenses, the tithe, 10% of all increase. and then your other expenses from there. I think, it shouldn't be scary. Financial shouldn't be scary. It's actually very straightforward. We shouldn't try and mystify it. It's quite simple. I think, and perhaps Chris wants to talk to this in a second, but I think where a lot of people get unstuck is we're living beyond our means. Right. Our expenses are exceeding our income. Therefore, we're having to service our monthly lifestyle using a credit card or using debt or something like that. That is probably a don't. Do not do that. Either increase your income or reduce your expenses. And there are various ways to do that. But I think we need to demystify it a little bit. It's not that crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, the easiest first step is to sit down, write down every expense that you can possibly think that you have. That's the first step before you do anything. You need to understand where you're at right now. Because right now, and the banks have actually made this amazingly easy. A lot of them through their internet banking portals and things like that will actually itemize it and tell you and track it all for you. So it's even easier than when I went through trying to figure out what the hell does this mean and what money am I spending here and those sorts of things. But you need to write down everything. And the best thing to do is do it over a 3-month period, because over a 3-month period you'll generally have captured your once-offs and things like that might have come in that period. And then sit back and average that out to whatever your income is. So if you get paid weekly, average it back to weekly. If you get paid fortnightly, monthly, etc. And then if there is a gap, if there's a difference, you need to start having a look at, okay, what do I need to do to get this back into balance? If you're beyond your means, like Ben said, you need to address that. There's 2 ways to address it. One is to increase your income, but the easiest lever to pull is expenses. And I guarantee you there's probably lots of Uber Eats or, whatever that's probably been incurred, that probably shouldn't have been incurred. I get it. If you're lonely and you want to eat ice cream on a Friday night, you want to Uber Eats. I get that.
Afterpay. Get rid of Afterpay.
Afterpay.
Get rid of Afterpay.
I got to say this, Afterpay is just a debt, guys. It's, paid off in full. You're still going into debt. It's that you should read the statistics about the people who don't pay it off in full and then the amount of interest they get charged. But we'll leave that aside. But that's at the basic level. And yes, what Ben sort of talked about is important as well to factor in, because at the end of the day, that's the stewardship thing. And that's, I think you'll probably talk about that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Brilliant wisdom. So Ben, you mentioned tithes and offerings. So just moving into the space of giving in church and giving with our finances. Often in church, we're encouraged to give a lot and to give abundantly, which is amazing. So how do we do that in a way that's not like stupid or like blowing out the budget or just giving everything away and we've got nothing to live on sort of thing? Like, do you know what I mean? Like if we hear the Holy Spirit say, give this massive amount, but then we feel like we can't do that, how do we navigate that challenge?
Hello? Yep. It's a really, sorry. Hello. It's a really good question. It's a really good question. I think there's some fundamentals that never change. So the tithe should be a absolute stable in your weekly, monthly, fortnightly finances. Different people do it differently. You might have an auto debit set up or whatever. It's just a personal thing. We like to actually transfer it ourselves. It's just something that we do. I don't know. It's just a thing, but whatever works for you. So the tithe is absolutely fundamental. I think we're called to honour the tithe. The tithe's outside of the law, so any argument around this is an Old Testament thing or a New Testament thing, it's ridiculous. It was actually before the law. So we're called to honour that today. So 10% of all your increase. So that's one thing. I think that in terms of, our heart as a church to be generous, and obviously we talk about money and we have a segment every Sunday around that, it's just a great reminder and an encouragement, and we should take that. I do believe, because I have it personally, I experienced this, there are times where God will also speak to you to give over and above and beyond that, outside of the annual building program in Vision Builders. So something that, for example, Mel and I have made a point of doing is when we have a guest speaker, we want to honour them. So we give to our guest speakers and we honour them. That's just a personal decision, something that we felt the Lord speak to us. But then there's other things. It's a lifestyle of giving. You know, we're called to be generous people. I think that if anyone here or anyone listening is struggling around giving from a position of guilt, please stop. That is not the heart of God. I hope that's okay to say, Pastor Andrew. That is not the heart of God. He calls us to be cheerful givers, not under compulsion, but to give freely. Why? Because we've been given so much freely. And then you bring that back into the budgetary conversation. Yeah, you know, you probably won't want to commit to giving $1 million on one Sunday if you can't afford to do that. But there are times where I do believe that God will call us to do something extraordinary, something out there, something that might stretch us and challenge us. But I think that they're less frequent, to be honest.
You ultimately can't give what you don't have.
Right.
I mean, God doesn't want us to max out the credit card to give. That's not what he's calling us to do. God won't ask you, to give anything that you don't own. If it's a lot more, or if it is something that you don't own, that's probably not God. But I would say this, like, I take a step back and I always think, I love that story that Jesus talks about where he's sitting in the temple watching everyone come in and give. And there's there's the people giving out of their wealth and this, and it's a big show and all these sorts of things. And then there's a poor widow that comes in and gives 2 minas, which is like next to nothing, probably the equivalent of like, $10 today. And Jesus is so moved by her generosity. It was only a small amount, but it was what she had. It was everything she had. And she gave it out of obedience. And that moved the heart of God so much more than the big amounts of money. And sometimes, you can hear big amounts given and things like that, and you can think, oh, what can I do? What difference can I make? Jesus isn't interested in the number at the end of the day. He's interested in your heart posture. He's always been after our heart. And this is why we want to talk about money tonight at the end of the day, is that he wants our heart more than anything. And he wants the hearts of all the people out in the world. And that's why we talk about money, because at the end of the day, to reach the world, it takes money, it takes finance, it takes building buildings, it takes funding pastors and other people to plant churches and to build things. But at the end of the day, what God is, and Jesus is after is our heart. And so when he calls us to give, whatever it is, whether it's $2, $20, $200,000, we've just got to be in a posture, position ready to give it. And if it's everything we have in that moment, that's fine, because ideally you're living in a budget where there's going to be a surplus that builds it back up again. But I think that it's just the heart posture that you're giving everything to God in that moment.
So good. If we can finish on this last question, and Pastor Andrew, maybe if you want to start this, has there been moments where in your financial journeys where you've had to trust God? It's been a challenge, and maybe it is around vision builders or giving in church or any financial challenge really, but moments where you've had to really trust God, that could just encourage people tonight, and what you actually did spiritually, practically in those moments to be able to walk through those challenges.
Great question. I think which year do you want to talk about? All the time. It's a reason that I think, with one of the scriptures in Malachi, or Malachi, if you're Italian, it says, you bring all the tithes in the storehouse, test me in this, test me, there's a test in it. I think generosity or giving outwardly is a measure from us almost of that testing of God, not like he wants us to fail, but like it's our faith outworked. And I was just thinking about it, Nick, and it's like, I could talk about a lot of things, but I actually think one of the first times I learnt generosity was when I was a youth leader. And I was a uni student, and I was driving that Corolla that Chris was mentioning before, not the one I bought later. This the 1979 white Toyota Corolla that was a beast, and I'd pick up a lot of guys like Chapo and bring them to youth and back. And I didn't have a lot of money at all, and so how did generosity outwork? I was beginning to tithe as I had a little part-time uni job. And I found almost every week it was a test, because I'd fill up a car, I'd go pick up all these kids everywhere, and then people like Chris were very hungry at the end of it, so we'd do the Macca's runs and the KFC runs, and I really just felt like one of the things that God was calling me to do, the outworking of that generosity, was to try to be a blessing to them and love on them and be a an example to them. And even though I didn't have a lot, that was the outworking of generosity. And I literally, I remember week after week in that Corolla going, Lord, I need some money to fill this car up. Like, I don't have any more left, but I didn't want to sacrifice what I felt was a big part of what God was calling me to do, which was to be a blessing to these young guys that were coming through. And so I learnt it back then. And it was, for me, it was that, like, seek first the kingdom of God and then everything else to be added unto you. And I learned to trust God in little tithing, which it was just my 10%. I don't know what it was, 15, 20 bucks. But also trying to be a blessing to other people where I was. And I learnt that week after week as I went through uni, trying to do exactly what I felt God was calling me in my heart to do. And that was to love on and bless and look after young people where I was. And so I think that was the first moment where I really felt like, okay, God can provide, Andrew. Like, God can provide for you supernaturally. Like, when you don't think you've got enough, even to get through the week, you can't pay your rent or you can't pay that. And, you know, even when you're budgeting and doing all those things, like, God can be Jehovah Jireh. And I learnt it. I'm so glad I learnt it when I was in my 20s, when I didn't have a lot. And that has just stayed with me all the way through. I know I can trust God. I know you could throw me in any situation, seriously. And it's not that I'm some incredible person. I just know how faithful and how good God is. And he's never let me down. And he's never let my family down in any season of our life. He's always faithful.
Even after eating 100 hamburgers, Pastor Andrew would be... No. Did you want to say something there?
Yeah, I mean, Pastor Andrew's comments are just amazing. Totally agree. Echoing that, when is there ever not a time where you have to trust God in your finances? Like, so, I mean, you know, we run our own business now and, you know, payroll rolls around every fortnight and you've got to make sure that you have sufficient cash flow to be able to, it's a bit detailed, but, you know, to be able to pay your staff and pay your expenses. So Mel and I really believe God either in our finances has us in one of two positions. He's either trusting you or he's testing you.
That's good.
And a great example of that is we're kicking off, just a quick story, we're kicking off a new venture. We're purchasing our first childcare centre and everything. That's progressing, which is really exciting. It's amazing. We had a dear friend reach out to us just last week. At the same time, we were going to contract to purchase the first centre. This friend, and so finance is tight. It's all a bit crazy. This friend reaches out and says, hey, I'm reaching out to a bunch of Christian business people because I know of a Christian school in North Queensland. We're trying to get some funds together so that we can afford to fund a teacher for this Christian school for the next school year. And it's one of those moments where it's, okay, God's testing me here. You know, we're moving into the education space. There's a need to give into education in this other area, into this amazing, you know, opportunity over here. God, we believe this is from you, so we're going to do that, you know, and we're going to trust that you're going to make a way in this other area. We find, honestly, that happens so much. And we've just learned to rely on God in those opportunities and take those opportunities to give. Because when you do that, God, yep, I know, I can trust them. I can trust them now. I can trust them in that space, in that season, and you watch. God is amazing. You plant 1,000 seeds, he'll return 30, 60, 100-fold. It happens all the time. We've seen it time and time again. So that's just a little story.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Any final words or stories from you, Chapo?
I think more than anything, just to echo those points, like there's been many times in my life where I think one thing I would say is life only gets more complicated as you get older. You get married, technically, I guess. You have kids, you buy houses, you do all these sorts of things. And I think when you can set your heart young to, it's like Joshua says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Come hell or high water, no matter what's going to happen, no matter what pressures are facing me. If you can learn that when young, when the stakes are low, you've got so many more reservoirs and resources to lean on when you face your next giant, whether it's a house purchase, whether it's starting a business, whether it's even just simple little things like, you really, the dreams and desires God puts in your heart. You might have a time where you lose your job and you're needing to believe God, I need another job. You need to, if you can grasp that, and even if you're older, there's no time like the present. The saying goes, the smartest time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The next smartest time is today. And that's really what this is all about. You might not have done this well, or might not have applied this or done this practically in your own life, but you can start today. Because again, life's only going to get more complex than what it is today. It never gets simpler. And we need to be able to develop the relationship and the heart posture with our Lord, with our Jesus, who will supply all our needs according to his riches and glory, that as we trust him, as we act obediently and we put him as Lord in our hearts, not money, not finance, not needs, not wants, we put him in our hearts, then that will set us up for whatever we're doing in the rest of our lives and the steps that we take and the challenges we face. So, yeah.
That deserves a round of applause, I reckon. That's brilliant. Brilliant wisdom. So good. Thank you so much for sharing. I think just finally to say, we've talked about so much tonight, but again, there's so many resources and people in our church that are just willing to invest in all of us. And so one final encouragement, just to reach out to people, to ask those nitty-gritty questions, to learn off the wise, because when we learn off the wise, we become wise. So can we give our panelists a massive round of applause?